once again, I don't do these things just because they came to my mind, but let's say various signs have been pointing in our activities toward alchemy for the last, certainly the last month and maybe more so. So it seems to be time to be doing that. It is because it is one of those perennial devices which never disappears. So that alchemy comes back again and again in various ways and in various forms, even in our lives, and so seems to be the time now. So there have been just, at least in my life, there have been various signs and wonders, little things, each one of which pointing toward alchemy. So I said, all right, is there somebody trying to tell us something? And I said, well, whether there is or not, we are going to do it. And therefore, that is what we shall do, and hope it works out well, because we have some very good materials. It's really more a matter of displaying them accurately and with sufficient preparation, but I think we shall be able to do it. Now, this evening, however, I intended to complete the series which had a good deal to do with Sophia, and so with another aspect of the study of the feminine deity, which we pay probably far too little attention to, but which is very important nevertheless. And now we know that in ancient times, and coming from originally probably Egyptian sources, there was a definite presence in the Mediterranean area of the divine feminine, which in part came over from Egypt to Italy and Greece, and which had to do with the tradition of wisdom, and that is the story of Sophia. Now again, this is not our invention, and not even the invention of the ancient Gnostics, because all along there were authoritative scriptures in several jurisdictions, in several religious groups, which extolled the importance and the presence of wisdom, always giving her a feminine gender. And so what subsequently, because of the lingua franca, became known as Sophia, who became known as Sophia, previously Chochmah in Hebrew and various other languages, so that it was always there. However, there is something important that we forget, because one very often neglects or forgets right what is in front of one's face. At least that is what happens to me. Then I go on to something else. And what is in front of our face is a tremendously important and influential and perennial archetype in the West, which has a relationship, of course, to the Gnostic or Gnostified image of Sophia, but which is really another, and which was tremendously influential, and which I think that we should certainly not leave out of our calculation. And who do you think that is? Why, the Virgin Mary. Now, the growth of the image of the Virgin Mary, the presumed mother of Jesus, has come very early upon Christianity, and it spread all over the world where Christianity was present. And it is undoubtedly, if we look at it in a very profound manner, we can find that it has a close relationship to the wisdom archetype of Sophia, and that it is a very important one to contemplate. Moreover, if we are honest about it, and if our sources of information are accurate, then I would say in the history of the West, by which we include Constantinople and the various offshoots of the Eastern Orthodox tradition as well, the influence of the figure, of the archetype, whatever you wish to call it, of the mysterious personage referred to usually as the Virgin Mary, has been with us and has been immensely influential. I have been known in my more daring times to say such things as, had it not been for the figure of the Virgin Mary, the alleged mother of Jesus, Western Christendom would have disappeared from the face of the earth, and that our entire culture, originating in the Mediterranean area and then proceeding to various places from there, is very heavily involved with the figure of the Virgin Mary. Now, what we need to keep in mind is, if we can, that this can act as an example as to how archetypes come to be archetypes and how they should be treated by us. Because an archetype, to use Jung's expression, it really means ancient image. Arche is ancient, image, imago, is, so it's an ancient image, an ancient picture. So when we take that view, then we can, I think, discover that we have here certainly a figure, an image of great antiquity, but also which also attains to a tremendous, overwhelming, and undeniable influence for several thousand years by now. More so than perhaps any that we have knowledge in history, and this must be understood and must be appreciated. So, what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a feminine archetype, shall we say. Just like we are dealing with various feminine saints of later period of time and so forth, but there it is. Now, in addition to that, we have to remember that this archetype, in turn, has pretty well conquered the known world in terms of its fame, in terms of its cultus, that means worship, in terms of its incredible influence on vast numbers of people, pretty much all throughout history since the 1st or the 2nd century. So we need to remember always that we Gnostics may, of course, be desirous of reviving and stimulating the attention given to the Gnostic Sophia, which is from biblical times, and all you really need to do about learning about that, you need to read the Book of the Wisdom of Solomon, Ecclesiastes and Ecclesiasticus, and maybe there is one more, the so-called wisdom literature of the New Testament, which is all consists of discourses which are given by a feminine being, wisdom, and which are singular beauty and which have never been disavowed by the Christian Church, far from it, and which is known as the literature of wisdom, or Sophia. But now, in addition to that, and from the very beginning of the Christian era, we have also another, which is maybe a little more complex for our understanding, because it is in part historical, in another part semi-historical, and in another one definitely by now archetypal. So we need to keep in mind that if we want to use such expressions, and they are very useful, as Jung's discovery of the reality of the archetype, arche meaning ancient, typos meaning an image, an ancient image, then it is certainly very important for us to recognize such phenomena when they occur in our midst. Now, from the beginning of the Christian era, beginning with the earliest documents that have been found, both Orthodox and heterodox, let us say, there was a recognition of not primarily the wisdom woman in the heavens, who inspires good and insightful and wise thoughts, as the Book of the Wisdom of Solomon puts it, but rather a allegedly historical figure who was none other but the mother of Jesus. Now somehow this figure, since our fire season, it's a little bit difficult to keep from coughing and giving various other signals that smokes have caused. But let us say from the time of the lifetime of Jesus onward, there was a constant preoccupation, sometimes more frequent and more powerful, and sometimes waning and waxing, of interest in and a devotion to his mother. Excuse me. So, and unlike other archetypal figures, because after all, the Bible is full of them, both Old and New Testament. If you I think the archetypes maybe don't want me to talk about this. No, I'm afraid they don't want me to talk about a lot of things. So, let's say, from the beginning of biblical times, when the founder of the Christian religion, who is without question Jesus of Nazareth, walked on earth, there was connected in various ways with his figure a probably still quite young Jewish woman by the name of Mary, or Miriam, which would have been the Hebrew form, and who with the life story and the death of Jesus and subsequently the growth of the Christian religion has become a sort of living archetype herself, first living and subsequently having gone to a higher condition. In fact, that is the incident, shall we say, that I never forget, that in 1940, I didn't look up the exact date of it, around 47, 48, Pope Pius XII, a very great and very wise pope, had decided that the mother of Jesus required higher status, a further advancement in the view of the people. And so he declared from the steps of St. Peter and very beautifully broadcast all over the world, he declared that the Virgin Mary did not die an ordinary death, but that she was taken bodily out of this world to himself in the highest heavens. And I remember when the Pope proclaimed that in beautiful, he spoke the most beautiful sonorous Latin that you have ever heard. And I studied 8 years of Latin myself, but I'll never master the language as he did. He said, proclamamus, declaramus et definimus. We proclaim, we declare, and we define that the Virgin Mary did not die a physical death, but that she was taken by her Son to himself in heavenly glory. And here we were in our little exile kitchen in Hallstatt in Austria, my father and mother and I, all three of us on our knees, listening to Pope Pius making this announcement. It was definitely greatly impressive. So now, of course, again, pronouncements of this sort are most of the time it's really not something new. It may be new to you, but it is not new to others, and it's not new to the proclaimer, and so it was here. So this is actually a mystical teaching which has existed in both the Eastern and the Western Church for a long time, and which was just formally proclaimed at this time. And you know who was apparently one of the most joyous over this proclamation, and just about went into ecstasies, was Carl Gustav Jung in Zurich. He said, now it is happening. Now the feminine archetype by way of the Virgin Mary is going to enter, and it's going to take many years before it really transforms the culture, but it will do so. And he was very, very happy. And he was quite friendly with Pope Pius anyway, and he received a condemnation, sort of like an honorary Vatican doctorate from Pope Pius. And Pope Pius said that you who are a Protestant and the son of a Protestant minister, you have done more to advance the Catholic faith than anyone I know. Because he felt that the psychological understanding of religious matters that was brought to bear by Jung was extremely valuable and extremely happy and healthy. So let's say that is just a sideline of the situation. But up to that time, in the Greek Church particularly, because it's really that territory, there was for a long time it was celebrated what was called the dormition, which means going to sleep. You know, the dormition of the Holy Theotokos, and Theotokos means the Son of God. And that was always, and the Greeks said, well, that's very nice that the Pope did that, but we believed in that already for a long time. So, you know, that's the way the Greeks are, you know, they know everything better than you. So when you're dealing with Greeks, you have to keep that in mind. In any event, it's caused quite a commotion, especially among Protestants, who, of course, always are trying to diminish the stature of the Theotokos. Well, that it's not biblical, and this, that, whatever other arguments they have, but all of it is nonsense. The fact of the matter is that ever since biblical times, ever since the 1st and the 2nd century, the veneration, the study, the exaltation of the figure of the Virgin Mary was there in Christendom, whether it's Christendom of the West or Christendom of the East. So this simply has to be understood. Now, but it wasn't only there because a Pope declared it or something of that sort, but it grew into the, I would say, the second most powerful and important, I'll use the Jungian term again, archetype of the Christian era, because from biblical times onward, she was revered almost as much, or certainly very, very close to the reverence that was given to the figure of Christ. So, just as soon as she had gone to heaven or wherever she went, and probably even before, she was and she remained for a couple of thousand and more years. She remained the most important figure of Christendom in the history of the world. And if we don't recognize that, then we simply don't recognize history, which is, of course, what we very often do. I think we have historically badly informed people all over the world, and many of them may be Christians, and many of them may be Jews, and many of them may be Muslims or whatever, but they are all there. However, it is true that if we want to use that term, and after all we are sort of all these semi-Jungians here, we are dealing with archetypal transcendental realities. We are not just dealing with historical figures. Now, very often, although not always, what C.G. Jung called, and many people since then continue to call archetypes, were historical figures at first. Arthur, the king whose body presumably lies in his grave in Avalon, and so forth, and the central figure of all the Arthurian legendary, Was he a historical figure? Maybe. Is it important? No. Because on archetypal reality is so powerful that it literally does away with any intellectual or physical obstacle that may stand in its way, and it becomes a tremendously important and inspiring and transformative image. Typos is an image, but as such, it's immortal. And so that is what has happened. Now, if I were a little stronger today, because this week I had some difficulties, from time to time this happens to me. While in my pursuit of daily activities in my apartment, I fall. And when I fall, I cannot get up, because my muscles are too weak by now, So then various people come around, my neighbors, or cleaning lady, and so they try to lift me up, and nothing happens. So it becomes quite an opera buffa, but they still couldn't get me up. So what happens, this is now the third or the fourth time that I fell and I couldn't get up, and then one gets the paramedics, who usually consist of medically trained firemen, come, and they pick me up like they would pick up a safety pin off the ground. Oh, hello there, come on. So fortunately that has happened, but at the same time it takes a toll on you too. So I'm still suffering from the next to the last fall in my shoulder, things like that. So it kind of makes things a little bit difficult. But in any event, that has not so much to do with archetypes, except maybe with the archetypes of the medically trained firemen in Los Angeles, whom we should be grateful for. I asked one of them, did you have a lot of work during the fire? Oh man, he says, don't remind me. So in any event, the issue being in this case that if we look at history, especially the history of the West, but that doesn't really mean that much anymore, because these archetypal figures, such as that of the Virgin Mary and certainly of Jesus, and so they spread all over the world and they can be found everywhere. So obviously, what we are dealing with here now is a universal phenomenon. I have not been there, and so I'm talking off the top of my head, but for instance, the international headquarters since Blavatsky's and Olcott's day is in India, and the world headquarters is in Adyar in the south of India. And I understand from the people who have been there that sort of right about where the end of the Theosophical Adyar estate ends, then there is a mountain. There are various interesting places. One of them is the presumed tomb of St. Thomas the Apostle on St. Thomas Mountain outside of Madras. And another one is even closer to the Theosophical headquarters, and that is the place where a white lady, and I don't mean white in the face necessarily, but a white who wears always white, a white lady comes forth and talks to people, and people receive various benefits and various healings from her and so forth. And so the Christian Indians call her the Virgin Mary, and other people, Hindus, come there too, and they just say, well, she's the white lady, that's all right. And so, in any event, things of that sort and somewhat related occur all over the world. And so let us say, especially, of course, with a grounding in Catholic nations, such as certainly Spain and many others, France, Germany, and with Fatima, Portugal. So, it's not confined to any one place, but it's usually, these things usually appear in a locale where there is some responsiveness to that. Now, just to show you how that things work, it's a minor thing. I was raised in a family, we had a gigantic garden. This was in northern Hungary at that time. And in summertime particularly, we had an astonishing and frightening amount of lightning from the sky that would come down. Because we had very tall, very old trees. Heck, they were there since the 1830s and things like that. So we had such. And then one time my father came in and says, come on, I was still pretty little. I want to show you something. So it was after a thunderstorm. So we went out into the garden, and there were a number of trees, and the lightning likes to hit tall objects. So it hit one of the trees. The lightning came down the tree to the earth, and so there was black marks on the tree, and on one side of the marks it says, come on over here, I'll read it to you. I don't think I knew because I was reading a newspaper for my father every morning. That was my job. And so he says, look what it says here. And so in black, fiery letters, which had been burned into it by the lightning, the tree had an inscription going down from above below, Immaculata, in Latin, the Immaculate One. So my father said, well, we've been honored by a sign by the Blessed Virgin. This was actually pretty close to where our family chapel was located. And we went into the chapel and said a Hail Mary, and it was there for years. So now, this is just an ordinary sign that could have happened to anybody, but let's say such and much more strange and much more miraculous phenomena were occurring all over the world ever since biblical times, and they still do. Now, how that happens, why that happens, why we should concern ourselves with, I don't know, but I think it's important to keep in mind. So let's say with the birth of Jesus and subsequent events catalogued in the Bible and so forth, a new archetype has been created. Now people, of course, come up with all kinds of really ineffective and silly ideas, such as, the mother of Jesus wasn't there anymore. She wasn't at this particular time. She wasn't at that particular time, and then she died. So trying to historically invalidate these apparitions. Well, certainly she also did not go physically to Mexico and talk with the gentleman whose picture she imprinted on his serape, and who was then declared by the Pope as the Empress of the New World, the Virgin Mary. So, of course, when you call it the Virgin Mary, then it is the Virgin Mary. But you know what? There's somebody there. There is something there. And this has been going on since biblical times. Now, of course, the main opponents to this and the main critics of this are a peculiar people who are called as Protestants. I often say, people ask me, are you Catholic or Protestant? Well, you know what, like the Mormons say, I don't protest against anything. I may protest against the U.S. government now and then, but I don't really protest against anything, so obviously not a Protestant. But you know, the Protestant Reformation, which I think more properly may be called the Revolution, has been very intent on let's see, what was the word that I had in my mind? On trivializing the Catholic faith. Anything that's mythological, that's poetic, that's beautiful, that's artistic, you got to take it down, you see. Now, why that is, I don't know. Probably because the original Protestants were all very prosaic-minded Germans, the beer-drinking companions of Martin Luther. Everybody who knows, who read history, knows that Martin Luther liked beer very much. And I commend him for it, because I tell you, some good beer can really be very good. But let's say, you know, there is a definite prosaicizing tendency. So everything that can appear very archetypal, very angelic, very mysterious and inspiring in the Catholic version, in the Protestant version, it was blah, blah, blah. You know. It is just very prosaic. Now, of course, there are people whose mind is prosaic and who appreciate that, but I tell you what, mine is not, because I was raised on good German fairy tales, not only of Grimm, but many others, because they are a little bit too grim. But let's say it's very important in religion, in culture in general, to have a good active imagination. Without the imagination, you haven't got anything. Why? Because it's the imagination that gives life to your experiences. And therefore, imagination is very closely connected, interwoven with occult disciplines like clairvoyance, clairaudience, mediumship, various things of that sort. Without an active imagination, those things tend not to happen. And in going way back earlier in the Middle Ages, you know, the man who became the patron saint of magic and occultism, Albertus Magnus, Saint Albert the Great. He was an archbishop in Germany, and he had a disciple whom he was teaching whatever he was able to teach him, who came from a town named Aquino and who became Thomas Aquinas. So, very, very brilliant people. And Albertus Magnus in his work puts down that the imagination is the magician of life. With the imagination, you will have a fine life, an exciting life, and an inspiring life. Without the imagination, you are not going to. So this is very important. And that once again, it's not that you're, they want me to make up things. Well, that's a stupid expression, but let's say, that's not what we are dealing with. But it's not a matter of making up lies and then pretending that they are real, but rather that you take the inducement in your own mind that there's something important here that you might want to know. There is something important here that is trying to disclose itself to you. If you have the right kind of magical ear, then that will come to you. Now, of course, if instead of that you are thinking of the Ukrainian war, well, then undoubtedly nothing much is going to come to you, because you don't exchange your vision of the inner worlds with the unfortunate vision of the outer world. So, and if you practice that, and again I hesitate to bring up so many personal issues and memories, but let's say I was an only child. There were no children in the neighborhood, nobody to play with and things like that. And so, let's say, the imagination took over. And I'm glad, because it started me on a path wherein the imagination is very important, on the path of occultism, on the path of magic, and all of these things. None of that works without the imaginatio in Latin, which means making images. So you get an idea, I get an idea of St. Thomas Aquinas. No. The imagination, if it kicks in, I'm going to see the old friar. He was, particularly toward the end of his life, he was quite corpulent. And they showed me a monastery in the Apennine Mountains in Italy. I don't know whether they were making up things or what, but they showed me a monastery where St. Thomas lived for a long time. And at the refectory, which is where people eat, at the refectory table of the monastery, there was one seat, one spot, that was cut out like this, because that's where Thomas sat in the 1100s. And if otherwise he wouldn't have been able to sit down. So his good brothers made a room for his ample midriff at the table. But anyway, it's also a very, very wise and very informed man who knew a great deal about magic, because he learned it from Albertus Magnus. In any event, let's say there was a time when magic and religion were one. And it's never really separated, because I know that most Catholic priests would be incredibly angry about this, and I made quite a few of them angry, to my credit, over a period of time. But the issue is that when you are touching supernature, then supernatural things are likely to happen. But you got to watch out. You should not do what you are doing in religious terms in order to experience supernatural things. If the objective is a phenomenon, that's not so good. Because then the objective of your search is too ordinary, too mundane. And the best miracles are really spontaneous. Boom, there they are, right in front of you. You know? And certainly St. Thomas, whom a friend of mine called the Holy Count of Roccasecca. He was from the family of the Counts of Roccasecca, and from the time that he was little, he always wanted to become a monk. But his father didn't want him to become a monk. And so the whole family made an attack on the monastery where Thomas was ensconced. And they took him out of the monastery. Well, just as soon as they took him back to the castle in Roccasecca. He escaped and he was there with the monks again. And so and then he became really one of the greatest saints and scholars of the church, and the biggest university in Rome is the Dominican University, which is called the Aquineum. It's taught by Dominican fathers. In any event, so one has to strike a middle ground between forcing your imagination and between denying your imagination. The world at large in our secular society tries to deny the imagination, except in some things called science. If you name it science, and then there comes, what is it now is the what is it, all of these things, those are real. Well, let me tell you, there are a lot of, and there are a lot of other things that are real. There are a lot of other things that are more real. There are a lot of other things that are more enduring and that will still be here many, many years from now. Now that's just a kind of a little pitch for something. I don't know what it is for a pitch for, but these things are of considerable importance. Now, the issue, let us say, having been that the figure of the Virgin Mary, and I'll mention something about that, of the Blessed Virgin as she is often referred to, is, let's say, invites this sort of thing, because it calls forth the imagination, but there is also a transfigurative reality in it. So you see, imagination can take you to a reality that other things will not take you to. And when people tell you, oh, that's just your imagination, tell them, that's just what I wanted. See? Because along with others, it's an opening into various realities that otherwise would not be available to you. So why put it down? Well, why? Because people are stupid. But in any event, now, so over the centuries, but rather quickly also the fame of the Virgin Mary grew and grew, and all over the world, both the Roman Catholic world in terms of people who lived there, and the Greek Orthodox and other Orthodox churches, all of these were more and more devoted to and built churches to and statues and icons. The Greeks don't build statues because the statues remind them of the pagans. That's why you don't have statues. You know, the only Orthodox church that has, with that name, the only Orthodox church that has statues is the Syrian Orthodox Church in India. And if you want to see one before you leave, you can pull that curtain aside, and behind it is a statue of Sophia, which was made and marketed by Syrian Orthodox people in the south of India. Took us, how long? Took us about 2 months after we ordered it that it got here. But it got here and it was in good shape. However, it's made of a material that gets dirty very easily, so when the weather gets nice, we are going to have to give Sophia a bath. But let us say, that's where there is, the others are all icons, which are, you know, a flat surface with colors depicting some saint or some holy event. So but let's say one way or the other, the popularity of the Virgin has mounted and mounted throughout the centuries, and is still very, very important. And it would seem, even if you pay attention, that every time things get kind of ugly and disgusting and boring, and there's another Marian apparition somewhere, almost as if she says, "Come on, guys, don't be bored. I can give you sacred entertainment, see, the kind that you cannot find anywhere else." Quite likely. In any event, now, of course, the logical mind, which in spite of our illogical, magical, theosophical preoccupation we still have, you know, is as well, what does she do? Who is she? You know what? That doesn't matter. She is what she is. And she probably, she originated with the figure of the Virgin Mary. But by now she has apparitions which relate to that subject. And so what I'm trying to say is, one does not have to blindly believe that when you see an apparition of this sort, or a miraculous even event of the Madonna, that is the actual mother of Jesus just the way she was. No, it's an apparition. It is something that she or other great angels, spiritual beings are making to appear for your benefit. But you should not make it too material. And this, of course, is a big difficulty, because along come these Protestants and historians and various ones. Well, if she had really been the one, she would look different. She would talk different. you know what, if you shut your mouth, then you would probably do something different too, because that's, that's not what's important. What is important is the spirit in a person of this sort. And excuse me. And by the way, it's ever since the fire there is coughing and sneezing in abundance. But in any event, when you have a religious or spiritual or whatever you wish to call it, experience, don't try to look for its factual aspects, because whatever the facts may be in such a case is not what's important. What is important is what is beyond the facts. And what is beyond the facts, you have to catch it with your imagination. And then you are moving toward real gnosis. Now I know to some people would say that this is legerdemain, but it isn't. It means that in order to cognize the supernatural, we have to move into the realm of cognition of the supernatural. If we stay outside of it and say, "Oh well, that's a movie projection," so you always find some excuse. Then the excuse, which will be real, but the real thing will not be real. So that is why it's very difficult to try to explain, because obviously we have to keep our reason, obviously we have to look at our experiences with a certain amount of recognition and seeing through illusions and things of that sort. But at the same time, when something real happens, we have to be there to experience it. And once again, I think I can, without going into details, because they're going to call me the braggart if I do, but let's say when I was a partaker of unusual experiences, you go with the experience, see where it takes you. You don't have to interpret, even, you don't have to, "Oh, well, this is probably this or that, and this is not the Virgin Mary, this is Saint Teresa," or something. No, just experience and get the benefit of the experience. Now, we could go on like this forever, which would not be to our benefit, but let's say for probably about 2,000 years by now, the figure, at least what people think, that people have been told, is the semblance of the Virgin Mary, the Mother of Jesus, has been abroad in the land, has been performing or facilitating miracles, and has been a great help to humanity. Because for one thing, when there is appearances of the Virgin Mary, have all, as far as I know, I certainly haven't read them all because there are 10,000 of them about, but let us say they are all of a beneficial nature, and which brings up probably the sort of a mega issue as to what influence, what cultural change or things of that sort, can we expect from the Marianic apparitions? From well, I would say that if you are looking for characteristics that are common, they are always kind, they are always loving, they are always maternal, they are like a holy mother. So that being the case, I don't think that we have to be afraid of it. You know, probably much less so than others, because occult phenomena, even when they sort of playing with being religious, can be a problem. There is disguise going on in the occult world, and sometimes what pretends to you of being very kind and very benign is not really of that kind. That is why somewhere in the Old Testament it says you must prove the spirits. You have to have a confrontation with a spirit in order to see whether it's really genuine or whether it is a mere apparition and things of that sort. But let's say the many nations have been guided and blessed for incredibly long periods of time by a figure that they believe, and probably rightly so, that is the figure of the Virgin Mary. And by the way, Virgin is I think you probably heard that, is a somewhat wrongful appellation here, because the word Virgo in Latin only means a young woman. And so when Mary is referred to as the Virgin, it means that she was a young woman when she became a mother. Then all other things are purely conjectural. And physical virginity, in the sense, the Romans, were very specific people. They were a nation of lawyers, just like Cicero was the great lawyer. And so they would say, well, if they are referring to a woman who has been deflowered, let us say, as a saying goes, then the Romans had a name for that. But a virgin who has not, a young woman who has not been deflowered, shall we say that one was just a Virgo. For instance, all the women who were in the Vestal Virgins, which was sort of a pagan Roman nunnery, you might say, they were all referred as Virgo, and the head of the Vestal Virgins was, let's see, what was she? She was referred to as the Virgo Pontifex. You know who the Pontifex is now? The Pope. Pontifex Maximus, because that was also the title of the high priest in ancient Rome. So they otherwise they were the Vestal Virgins guarding the Sibylline books and all this sort of thing. So one should not be hung up on these things. And the idea that somehow the Blessed Virgin Mary conceived Jesus, and that there was nothing that resembles human sexuality involved. This has really never been proclaimed officially. It's just the thing is that obviously she's so pure and she was so nice. There had to be something like that. But these are unnecessary frills. But on the other hand, in many, many nations, I'll just send you the one of my own, of the Hungarians. First of all, the Hungarians were sort of shamanistic people coming in from behind the Ural Mountains, and then they got to present-day Hungary about 900 AD, and by about 1000 they changed to Christianity under Saint Stephan the King, and then went on from there. But the story goes, and he actually wrote it himself, that when Saint Stephan's son, who also was made Saint Imre, Emmerich, when Saint Imre was killed in an accident, and here was the king who had no other son. So Saint Stephan was obviously terribly chagrined by that, because it was a very difficult political situation. The pagans were likely to take over and everything if there was no king. And so he had a vision of the Virgin Mary, and he told her that he doesn't know what to do now, that none of his nephews and so forth were worthy, he said, to become kings. Of course, I think being that they were not good enough Christians. And so what is he to do? And then he said to him, I will be the queen. I will carry the crown. And so there are various beautiful pieces of art. Probably the most important one at the Basilica of Saint Stephan in Budapest, which is the altarpiece painting, huge painting. There is Saint Stephan kneeling, holding up the crown, and the Virgin reaching down and taking it up. And so ever since then, one of her official names in the Hungarian constitution was that she was the patrona Hungariae. The Poles, of course, like to do everything a little bit better than the Hungarians, and so in very recent times, the Polish parliament, the Duma, had proclaimed the Virgin Mary as the actual Queen of Poland at this particular time. She is the Queen of Poland. Well, that's all right by me. The Poles have good sausages. The Poles have good queens. It's all right by me. But in any way, let us say, those things exist. But so ever since then, since way back before around the year 1000, the Hungarians regarded her as their greatest helper and the one who really leads the country from the other side. And they still do, and it's a very Marian-oriented country with a great deal of art, some of which was actually painted by my great-grandfather, who was a very, very good painter. And now too that the oldest hymns, church hymns, are all addressed to the Virgin Mary in Hungarian, and some of them in Latin. So I remember when I was still in Hungary, and the communists were already coming in, but there was some Marianic holiday, I don't know which, maybe the Feast of the Assumption, although this was before Pope Pius declared the Assumption of dogma. In any event, we had a huge Marianic festival in Budapest, and I think they counted that there were more than 2,500 people on the streets carrying the banners of the Virgin Mary and so forth. And of course our great national hero, Cardinal Mindszenty, Joseph Mindszenty was there. I saw him come out of the cathedral, and we thought that with this many religious people, the enemy is never going to overtake us. Well, I'm afraid we were wrong. Even Hungarians can be wrong sometimes. So, in any event, however, let's say, as time went on and the decades rolled by, the people were still there. The people still had trusted, and they were still singing the old Marianic hymns, which for the most part go back to about the year 900. One of them, Boldogasszony Anyánk, which is, there is a strange play on words, which you only understand if you understand some Hungarian. But let's say the play on words is that the blessed, which we call in English the Blessed Virgin, in Hungarian is Boldogasszony, the Blessed Woman, which, however, also has other meanings, so that you come up with the exception of the Virgin is called both the Happy Woman and the Blessed Woman. After all, to become the Theotokos would be likely to make anyone happy. So, these are all sort of interesting things, and there are several big Marianic shrines, of course, in Hungary, and a great deal of veneration of the Virgin Mary, more so now than ever, so that I think the atheistic regime was unable to do anything with it. So now what does all this mean? I think it means that whether we are within the Catholic mythos in some form or the other, or the Orthodox churches or so, we should remember that the higher worlds interpenetrate this one. Heaven is not just somewhere else, it's right here. And in this heaven are great archetypal figures that are here to help us. Angels and the figure that we see as the Virgin Mary and others, these are all our helpers. They are the messengers of another world. They are messengers of another reality. And if we pay attention to that reality, then we will become more and more real ourselves. We will be more and more subject to the redemption factor of the universe, and we will see good and helpful things taking place and happening. So how can we prepare for that? What can we do? And I think it's already quite a bit past time. I think one of them is that we need to address these helpful figures and ask them for help, ask them for advice, ask them for strength. But for all of that, we need to use, as I mentioned before, our imagination, the imagination as instructed by the tradition, whether it's religious or occult or otherwise, will show us the way and will bring us to the conclusion of the difficulties that we may have experienced. Once again, those of us who went through difficult times and persecution and running away and things of that sort can testify to it, that if we keep going, if we continue to exercise our imagination, if we continue to be faithful to the faith, whatever it happens to do, then it will redound to our benefit and we will receive all kinds of help that we didn't imagine was available to us. Because help is here. If we are ready to receive it, if we are ready to use it, if we are ready to pass good things on to others, then all is well. If we cannot do that, well, then that's something else. But it's true. And so there are great helpers, like the figure that we think is the Blessed Virgin Mary, which deserve our attention, deserve our prayers. You should see my bedroom table next to my bed has so many rosaries on it that you cannot see hardly the surface of the table. Because, of course, that is one of the principal devotions, came from Spain, from Saint Dominic. So, in any event, there is something important there. There is something that humanity should not neglect. Because if we neglect the sacred, we neglect that which can give us help, then we will continue to exclaim, where cometh my help? Where is the help? The help is here if we know how to reach out for it, if we know how to prepare for it. Help is here, and undoubtedly this mysterious figure which the world thinks is the mother of Jesus, and perhaps is one of the best proofs for it. And so miracles are here, miracles exist, and the miracle workers are also here, and I would say, thank God for that. That's it.